You are listening to an Art Media podcast.
Yonatan, what's your number this week?
My number is 3 because Nvidia announced yesterday they're tripling down on their Beersheba, south of Israel, R&D center. That's another decision by Nvidia after we quoted Jensen Huang and the CEO here in Israel in their support of Israeli hostage, was their employee and came back to work after being in the tunnels in Gaza. The company is betting big on Israel, and my number is 3, the triple down on Beersheba.
Okay, my number is yours -1. It is 2. We have very small numbers this week. Mine's a little bit weird. This is the number of antitrust investigations that China has opened into American companies. But the reason I bring it up is that these antitrust investigations are all centered around American companies' acquisitions of Israeli startups. So Nvidia is one of them, their acquisition of Mellanox, and more recently, Qualcomm and its acquisition of a company called Autotalks. So I bring this up just as a reminder that there is this escalating broader geopolitical tension and friction that we're seeing between the U.S. and China. Israel is kind of in some weird ways caught in the middle. We'll get into more of that later. So all eyes are on the ceasefire, what's going on in Israel and the broader Middle East. But we've got a lot going on globally that's very, very impactful, shall we say. So Who wins?
I like your number. I think it's consequential. I love it because it actually alludes to the fact that there's some pretty unique technologies here in Israel that are so important that they raise a Chinese-American antitrust dynamic. But I think Nvidia tripling down on Beersheba, which is, the main city in the south of Israel, the sort of core city for the envelope of Gaza as well. This is very significant. It's yet another sign coming in from Jensen Huang. And I think it's very consequential. So I'm siding with mine.
I'll give it to you, not only because 3 is bigger than 2, but also because I do agree it's consequential. It is 11:30 a.m. in Palo Alto.
It is 8:30 here in Israel, p.m.
So I want to, before we dive into a few different items, I do want to just mention that unfortunately we were not able to record last week. And the reason is, we have a very good reason. It all goes back to AWS. Now, I know that this outage impacted governments and corporations, multi-billion-dollar global conglomerates and the like. But really, the biggest impact was on us, on what's your number.
Yeah, I agree. There's a poet in Israel who said, "My world is as narrow as an ant's view." It's all about us.
It totally is. By the way, the best story I heard about kind of an impact of this outage was, this company, the smart mattress company. I mean, there are several, but this one's called Sleep 8. So apparently, because those are also reliant on Amazon's AWS, people had their mattresses stuck in like random positions, or they overheated because they weren't connected to the cloud. So, all sorts of unintended consequences.
There is a cautionary tale in what happened with AWS. I mean, clearly we're the kind of least significant casualty of this. But, at the end of the day, the reliance on Amazon Web Services and other cloud providers through banks and infrastructure, trains, airplanes, it is a cautionary tale, for us going forward as the dependency just becomes bigger and bigger.
Absolutely. Diversify your cloud provider. If you haven't done so yet, do it today, including Riverside, I guess, and us. Let's move on to just kind of ceasefire. I don't know if we can call it post-war economic updates quite yet, but, we chatted through this over the last few days, Yonatan. What are you looking at as this still kind of fragile ceasefire is in effect?
Look, I think I'm very optimistic. There are, a lot of signs of normalcy back in the Israeli economy. The beat is up. Just, a couple of, things that may sound a bit inconsequential, but they are very important for the national psyche. Hapoel and Maccabi Tel Aviv, Hapoel Jerusalem have been allowed in basketball to go back to hosting in Israel. Again, may sound inconsequential, but this is kind of like really big in terms of like how being back to normal is a key thing for the Israeli economy. The Nvidia decisions, we're back to normal also on the news cycle. The kind of things that, you go back, you open the news in traffic and you're listening to non-war related economic stories. The focus is back on what matters. We heard Naftali Bennett today presenting a plan for a radical shift in the education system. It's good to hear the politicians going back to the, civilian agenda. What really matters for day-to-day Israelis, and really the education system here is in need of an overhaul that may require a long-term strike. And it's good to see some of the politicians raising the bar. Overall, that's a good sense of normalcy coming forward. The fog of war is still not lifted completely. There are concerns about the demilitarization with Hezbollah that's kind of starting to wobble. There are concerns about whether or not Hamas is going the right direction. I saw Khalil al-Khia being interviewed in Arabic in Al Jazeera, and I have to tell you, it's like we're back to October 6th on the other side, right? The guy's talking about how it was the right thing to do, and like, that's Al Jazeera, Qatar, on the day the emir was meeting President Trump on his way to his East Asia trip. So, on the strategic level, a lot of ambivalence, but on the kind of person-to-person on the ground, Tel Aviv is packed. The other day, I on Saturday night, I had to go meet a friend, and I literally couldn't walk the streets, like in some areas of Tel Aviv, because it was so packed. I was in Jerusalem last night for a town hall for Aleinu. Really incredible to see. There was the Super Classico, Real Madrid, Barcelona. It was like all the bars are full. Arabs, Jews, Christians. I think there's a sense of normalcy on the ground, and I hope it sticks.
Well, hopefully people can get back to complaining about traffic and other good things, I do think one question for me, and this is something we've talked about on the podcast, is what happens next? You mentioned the Arab media. What happens next also kind of in the cultural conversation, not only media, social media, but on college campuses, on the streets? There is a ceasefire in place now. At the same time, it doesn't look like people who have been calling for a ceasefire are necessarily celebrating the fact that there is one. And that says a lot. And I remember when we had Professor Netta Barak-Cohen on, she mentioned that BDS activity actually spiked when there were previous ceasefires. So I think that's a really good question for us to be asking, and to stay really vigilant on the kind of what happens next within the global conversation as well.
Yeah, look, there's a concern. There were a couple of delegations of Jewish communities here in Israel over the last couple of weeks. I had the privilege of talking to a few of them. There is a concern specifically around Mamdani, the New York elections, what that does to philanthropy that comes from New York into Israel, what that does to the Jewish community. I think that's a concern, and I think we're going to have to deal with the aftermath of the war, not just here in Israel. It's the global Jewish peoplehood dynamic. It needs to be redefined. I think there's going to be, I know of some initiatives that add up to north of $1 billion altogether if they all, materialize in the next year, of philanthropy and investment in Israeli academia. And I hope that facilitates an entire new conversation, dialogue between Israel and Jewish and ex-Israeli professors worldwide, to facilitate sort of back to basics dynamics on basic science and so on. And I think it also relates to our guests on the show today, these dynamics of where Israel is so strong scientifically. It's time to double down on those. And really my kind of inclination or battle cry is not to lean back. There's a sense of, the national therapy government dynamics, and let's relax and let's do a ripui. And Ben Gurion in 1949, after the Armistice Committee and the agreements were signed, and 8% of the Jewish population died in the war. That's the equivalent of 100,000 people dying right now. He did not go back to the public and say, hey, we're leaning back. We now have 2 states. We have, broader mandate than we had in the partition plan. Relax and let's do a therapy. No, he said, here are 11 national projects. We're going full on and we're going to build a state. We need to adopt that Ben Gurion agenda right now, not to lean back. There's a whole Turkish element going on. There's a whole reconstruction of the economy. And to me, double down, triple down, quadruple down on what I call the marks, right? Material science, AI, robotics, quantum, space, and synthetic biology. We're good at that. But the world is moving fast, and we were not moving as fast in the last 2 years.
Well, and to quote another great late man, Andy Grove, who wrote "Only the Paranoid Survive." So I think that's a good segue from Intel, former Intel CEO. This is like the semiconductor episode here that we're putting together. So today we are speaking with Elad Raz, who is the founder and CEO of NextSilicon. It's a startup that has pioneered a new chip infrastructure for use in high-performance computing. And it's got really big implications when it comes to AI. So we'll talk to a lot about where this technology is going and the role that Israeli innovation like his can play in this new area where compute power really, truly is the new oil and is so closely intertwined with geopolitics, both alliances and hostilities that we're seeing out there.
Look, I think, Israel is very proud of its Iron Dome. But in many ways, when you look to Taiwan, it has a silicon dome. It has demonstrated to the world that its control and prowess in the silicon domain in semiconductor has won a geopolitical power and wielded its capacity to retain its freedom. The fact that Israel has, aspirations in the silicon space and our silicon posture, as we'll hear from Elad, is so powerful. Definitely compared to the fact we're 10 million people, there are about 5 countries where Elads can rise and shine. People can come out with an idea for a new, chip with the ecosystem around it to build a company, people who know how to do it, the ex-Intel folks here in Israel, the Mellanox folks, the Habana Lab folks who are here and have the know-how and are recurring entrepreneurs, right? The Nvidia, we just discussed it in the numbers of the day, the Nvidia presence that's so robust, the ability to raise capital to the tune that NextSilicon has and to be so audacious in building silicon, innovation. There are about 4 or 5 countries. It's in the US, it's in Taiwan, it's in South Korea, which is mainly Samsung. So not a lot of entrepreneurship, but more kind of a, robust, kind of big conglomerate. It's the Netherlands with ASML, and it's Israel. And so Elad, and to our listeners, he's an amazing guy. Listen to sort of his vision, but also always keep it in the back of your mind. This tiny country in the Middle East has entrepreneurs of this caliber. It has a very strong silicon posture. And when we're going for AI, that's a very rare capacity to have as an ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth noting, especially as we segue to the Windex update, that despite the fact that, yes, Israel has had this talent in-house, most of it has not gone towards forming companies, in particular large companies, right? But this is also unique, I think, in that regard, where we're seeing more and more of these really, daring entrepreneurs actually try to create their own versus like join an Intel, which has always had a presence in Israel for a long time.
In many ways, Elad is, and we'll hear it from him, his theory about where semiconductors are going is very similar to, if you heard Jensen Huang in 2009 or 2011 saying, look, Intel is huge, but the GPU, what we're manufacturing is going to eat the CPU's lunch. And in many ways, Elad has a similar kind of concept. And again, the audacity in a good way, right? And the fact that when you are so audacious as an entrepreneur, you can raise capital and have the right human capital also. Israel speaks very highly of the ecosystem.
All right, well, let's move on to the Windex before we get to the interview with Elad. This is our What's Your Number index that tracks the performance of publicly traded Israeli-based or founded companies. Let's get to it. On to the Windex. Yonatan, how are things looking?
So to be honest with our listeners, last week, the Windex, when we recorded, was in the red because we followed a specific week. It was the first one after 8 consecutive weeks of a green Windex that was also overperforming both NASDAQ and S&P. We are now at a point where we are looking at a 2-week period, so Windex is back in the green, more or less equivalent to the S&P and NASDAQ. The Windex is performing at 2.26% in the green. 2 very interesting companies performing this week, one in the green, one in the red. The green is a company called Protalix, an old public company out of Israel, super interesting one, going up by 25% in a 2-week period. This is a company that used to be worth more or less, 50x than it is worth right now. A biotech company that makes proteins for human drugs in a way, right? So enzymes and others. It is a pioneer in that in the world, based on carrots. So they grow their proteins and their drug candidates. It's amazing. I was there in their facility up north, I think 15 years ago. You're like, it's like a sci-fi movie, like these huge canisters that are orange in which they grow the proteins. The company is up 25% because one of their drug candidates won an FDA clearance a couple of months ago and has been doing really well. And so Wall Street is paying very close attention to that. Again, a bit of a sci-fi, and I'm very happy to see Protalix kind of back on the rise.
I want to write about this just to have fun with the headlines, to be honest. The carrots are just, it's mind-boggling. And I love that it's actually orange canisters. This is a space I don't know a whole lot about, for full disclosure. This is more your world than mine, I think. But those stocks do seem to be pretty volatile. So I don't know how much we should be reading into this increase, right?
No, I agree. I mean, again, considering the fact that the company was worth 50x on the market cap and their promise ultimately was not delivered.
Okay, what's in the orange? Just kidding, red. We should have a new category just for orange companies. All right, what's in the red? What's the...
Il Makiage, remember, the cosmetics D2C Israeli new joiner of the Windex this year, suffered a 10% decline in the last 2 weeks for two main reasons. One, a reduction in analyst recommendations. And the second is what seems to be a persistent lawsuit that's referred to by Wall Street as AI washing, a class action lawsuit for security fraud led by an investor, an individual shareholder called Brian Hoare. I hope I'm pronouncing his name Hoare, Hoare, or Hoary. The notion is that they've overstated, the founders of Oddity, the use of AI in their technology for recommending which makeup to use. It's the first of its kind that I saw that is impacting a share price. I know for a fact in the private market, so many companies overstating their AI prowess, but it's an interesting one to watch. I'm a big believer in Oddity. I think they're going to recover.
Yeah, I had to look up this AI washing concept, which I wasn't familiar with, but this is a huge warning sign, I think, to companies that are pushing forward with this, whether intentionally or not completely, AI washing. I bet a lot of companies are doing it. So very interesting to see this.
Yep. And, there's one company that I looked up to for a very long period of time. They had an amazing IPO. That's Ginkgo Bioscience, ticker DNA, not an Israeli company, now trading for less than $1 billion. And that was a big AI promise. We'll do this and we'll that and synthetic biology. But some folks in and around the business already knew back then that's a promise they're not going to be able to deliver. And it is a thing where Wall Street loses trust. It is very, very hard to recover. Ginkgo Bioscience is a great example for that. And in that sense, I'm a big believer in the open market.
Yeah, and I think, it's becoming very, very clear these days that this new AI world that we're in is going to completely reconfigure who are the winners, who are the losers. I didn't totally expect that there'd be some losers because they're AI washing, not because they don't have their AI strategy right, or they're becoming obsolete today, Anyways, lots more to say there, but let's move on to today's long play. Today, we are interviewing Elad Raz, founder and CEO of NextSilicon. Elad, welcome to What's Your Number?
Thank you for having me, Michal and Yonatan.
Of course, we've been looking forward to this. So one of the things I did in preparation for this interview, and in order to get a better understanding, first of all, of your technology and what you're actually doing, is I asked ChatGPT to explain what NextSilicon does as if it's talking to a 7-year-old, because I have a 7-year-old, so why not? And here is what it served up. Imagine you have 1,000 toy cars that all need to go through a maze. A regular computer chip gives each car one path and they all wait their turn. But NextSilicon's chip is like a magical maze that changes its shape while the cars are driving, so the toy cars can go through faster and fewer get stuck. Does that accurately represent what you guys are doing?
I like it. I love it. And yes, I mean, in another way, I'm saying about what NextSilicon is doing, and we are doing those computing chip that accelerate supercomputing, high performance computing, AI, and machine learning. But think about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, the thing that we are doing on our daily life. Now, let's allocate the majority of the time, the 80%, to what matters. That's the 80-20 rule. Now, over the past 80 years, what humanity did is build computing chip, processor code that runs instruction. Like we all know what instruction is doing. It's a command that you give to the computer and the computer executes it. And it's executed one after the other. That's the processor code. That's what Intel invented in 1974 with the 4004. Moving forward to GPUs, we are still relying on those processor code to run instruction. What NextSilicon come is with a concept saying, well, in those massively parallel applications, in this workload that accelerates science code or AI machine learning neural network, there is a small percentage of the code that runs the majority of the time. So instead of us trying to accelerate every instruction one after the other, let's focus on what matters. Let's focus on these small kernels that run the majority of the time and accelerate them.
And this is what you're describing here is the Maverick chip, correct?
Correct. That's the Maverick chip.
Elad, Jensen Huang in 2009, when Nvidia was tiny and Intel was huge, was asked by Charlie Rose, what's the future of Nvidia compared to the size and strength of Intel? And his answer was kind of similar to what you just said. He said, the CPU was invented to address two key functions of the PC, which is basically a word processor and a big calculating machine. That's Excel and Word were the killer apps from Microsoft. It became huge, and the CPU supported these two. The GPU, which is what we invented, is going to support the thinking machines that are not going to do word processing and are not going to do calculations. So can you give us maybe a layer below, if you will, the philosophical thought process, right? Before we talk circuits and design and so on, how do you see computation and kind of the use of computers over the next, kind of decade plus and align for that as opposed to what we're doing right now with computers?
Let's start with beginning what the ChatGPT moment. I mean, we all understood that our life is going to change. And we are seeing that integrate more and more on our daily life. I mean, right now, as Michal said, the way that I'm using those large language model is by chatting. I'm sending a query, I'm getting a result back. And we are still using just a tiny portion of what we can squeeze out of this technology. Now, it's obviously that we need way more compute. Imagine that you will have those large language model running every second of your life, just analyzing everything. This is the agent mode that we are all talking about. How much compute the world is going to need. And the second layer is obviously us trying to optimize on power consumption and the amount of compute. Back in February and March, we seen the DeepSeek moment that causes a lot of the tech sell-off that, hey, we find a model that is way more efficient. Oh my God, with the world, we never need a compute. I mean, this is far from being truth. And just think about it. We have another 1000x of improvement to go. And what do you mean by that? Your human brain is working on 20 watt of operation. The same operation that LLM consumed 20,000 watt. Then we are going to see a lot of DeepSeek moment. You will find new neural network, new models, new algorithm. Well, the other level that is more that is more related to what NextSilicon bring is that when I started the company 8 years ago, I did it because I thought about new technology that was never existed. Okay. Like a data flow, a software that reconfigure the chip. I mean, highly technical. And this is what I wanted to do, even without knowing where it's going to lead me. And even without knowing what we are doing here at NextSilicon is doing a new technology that is not a better version. We are not developing a better GPU or a better CPU. It's like something completely else. This is why I'm getting so much excited. Those innovation has a chance to lead the market.
So I know Jonathan wants to talk chip design and circuits and go like inside. I'm going to like zoom way out. Sorry, Jonathan. But, Israel is obviously known for certain things when it comes to tech and cyber and software. But what are really the strengths and weaknesses for Israeli companies today in the space that you are in? Because this is not an easy company to start. You've been at it for 8 years. It takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of capital. Give us kind of like more ecosystem level. Where do you think things stand for companies like yours?
I think that Israel is blessed by innovator that thinks differently. And I think that the inception of semiconductor, chip design, compute design was at the beginning of the Israel nation. In 1953, the Weizmann Institute had a discussion whether Israel should build the first computer. And, it was very costly back then. It wasn't a transistor. It was those vacuum tube, the big machine. Not long time before that, the ENIAC was the first computer that is being built. And there was a discussion, hey, should we allocate 20% of Weizmann Institute to build such a machine here in Israel? And it came obviously to Elad Weizmann that say, yes, we are going to bet that because we don't know how building a new technology can lead the nation forward. And the build was carried out in 1954 and 1955. And it was a big undertaking, lots of money, and huge success, by the way. Kept running 24 hours for a decade, where like intelligence forces using it at night, researchers during daytime, and they even brought someone to operate the machine in Shabbat. Now, the other fun part of that story that no one knows is what happened. And this is also the Israeli mentality about, trust me, it's going to be okay, is when they switch on the machine. So there was a big celebration. Lots of VIPs came into the gallery in Weizmann Institute, and they turned on the machine for the first time. And guess what happened? Fire broke, and VIPs were all running around, and they shut it down. Then I asked one of the builders, hey, you haven't tested it before? So no, we were sure it's going to be okay. Now the reason why Jonathan smiled, because this is like the image and mentalities of Israeli founder, great innovation, but I think that the industry mature. I think that in the years to come, you had nationals like Motorola that came to Israel shortly after, IBM, Texas Instruments, obviously Intel with Dov Furman, that started the DRAM, the memory chip foundries, and then moved forward into the actual design with Dedi Perlmutter bringing, let's do the CPU core, the actual design, not just the manufacturing in Israel, and obviously Mellanox that got acquired with Nvidia. So this inception moment and multinational that discover Israel changed the industry, made Israel high-tech what it is today. We are now seeing way bigger companies. And if back then the amount of capex needed to fabricate the chip was relatively tiny, now we are talking about huge numbers. Intel is doing everything here. Nvidia is one of the biggest employers that are just keep getting more talent, and Apple that acquired a small company here and made it a big design center for the iPhone chip. The Apple Silicon was developed here. They bought a company called Anubit. So yeah, lots of exciting things happened here.
Go back for a second. You actually spent time at Mellanox, right? Did that kind of help shape sort of this aha moment that you had for this company? Or what was it that did?
Absolutely. At heart, I'm a software engineer. This is what I've done. I started a company, and later on, Mellanox acquired that company. And over there, I got exposed into supercomputing, high-performance networking, the way that those machines works. The question that I ask myself, we keep doing the same thing, and as kind of a hacker mentality. You know that in Israel, you have so many cyber companies. A reason why it is because this is what we needed for us to survive. So there is a big education about cybersecurity even before the military and during the military. So it's easy to do that. And then I thought to myself, well, I'm seeing all those incredible technologies. Can we make it better? I don't know, but it looks fun. And that's the start of NextSilicon.
Is it fair to say, Elad, we are looking globally at very few countries that have any significant, silicon posture? It's Taiwan, it's Korea, it's the US. How do you feel about Israel's posture when it comes to, the future of silicon, the future of semiconductors? Are we at a point where we can also draw and attract the global talent here that's non-Jewish, that's non-Israeli? Like, what's your thought process of continuing to build NextSilicon? Is Israel where it should be? Is it on the right track?
Absolutely, there is amazing talent here. There is design and there is silicon fabrication, manufacturing. That's the TSMC and Samsung and Intel. So in terms of design, we have A-class companies here. Annapurna Labs was a small startup started by Victor and Bilik and Nafa, got acquired by AWS, and they're literally running the entire AWS custom silicon here from Israel.
AWS is a sore subject for us right now, by the way, but that's okay.
Yeah. And, Apple Silicon and Intel developed their Pentium chip here. So in terms of design, we have world-class leading. The entire interconnect, the NVLink, the thing that made Nvidia AI factory rather than that's just a chip. If you hear Jensen is saying, here is a chip, but we are building those big AI factories. It's all developed here from scratch over the past 20, 30 years even. That's the Mellanox IP. By the way, there are good people here like Sandel Cohen that try to do a model to bring talent from the US to work here in like Bell's lab kind of model. And in terms of silicon manufacturing, we have the knowledge here in Israel because Intel started the EUV machine fabs here in Israel. Obviously, it's not a full technology transfer because you have the factories here. Personally, I don't believe that undertaking of investing $30 billion for leading edge fab, it's something that makes sense for Israel because it's huge investment, lots of trade secrets. But in terms of design, we are world-class innovators. Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said earlier about DeepSeek. And, there's this whole conversation now around this ever-growing need for more and more energy in order to fuel the growing AI needs. And then at the same time, innovation like what you're doing, right? And reportedly, what we're hearing out of China, more and more advances, who knows what's really going on, but reports of more advances on the energy efficiency side. Where do you kind of fall in that conversation? Are both equally important? What's ultimately going to lead the way forward to whomever succeeds in this race?
Performance and power consumption are tightly coupled concept. Given a chip that run twice as fast and consume twice the power consumption is diminishing return because you can just buy two chips together. And one of the things that we are seeing with GPUs, especially the leaded one, is that, at first glance, you're seeing twice the performance from generation to generation, but also power consumption goes twice. NextSilicon innovation aims to get 4x performance with half of the power consumption. Still, if you remember, we have like 1000x gap that will be used in like algorithmic breakthrough. But every vendor is doing its own part to gain more power efficiency. I mean, if you're talking about cooling, we have amazing companies here that working on cooling and infrastructure and rack level scaling and power consumption. So like we have the entire stack. ZutaCore is a company in the South doing a innovative solution where you can take a full data center and cool it with fraction of the power need. Also insane.
Just these last 2 minutes from Elad, just to give again context to our listeners, there are very few parts of the world that within, I would say, radius of 120 kilometers have all that stack in place, combined with capital, combined with the entrepreneurial, capacities. And in real terms, super competitive globally.
Well, so not to play devil's advocate here, but I am wondering, in terms of just down the road positioning for Israel, where this all goes, what's the plan here? And it's not just an exit plan question. It's really more about the placement and the bigger picture, because so much of this now touches on geopolitics and on this bigger arms race, right? As we spoke about primarily when it comes to AI and energy efficiency. So how do you think Israel is positioned? How can it better position itself to play a role, a successful role in this race?
Yeah. As you laid it out so clearly, compute is a nation need. It's a nation mission. It's not just cyber that it's about the compute, it's about the algorithm, it's about the data, it's about securing the future. A nation that will lead that market is going to win big time. The fact that we have here the talent that thinks differently, that innovate, true innovation. Every company I mentioned, every name dropping I did, it's not because it's a name drop. It's because someone who changed the Israel state and the global compute market. And we have here such a drive to win. We have limited resources. We have our own problems in the neighborhood. That's what makes us special, because we think very differently. So we can innovate. We can work in limited resources. That's great. That's an opportunity. That's what we are doing. And it's not just an exit strategy, not just a flip. I mean, you've seen huge companies, Mobileye, getting into IPO, big acquisition. That's what we are building here.
Last question for you, Elad. You etched the word Bereshit in the beginning on the first version of the Maverick chip, which is your flagship, your main product. I want you to just tell the story of how and what you have chosen to engrave on the Maverick 2.
I asked my rabbi in the shul when we did the Maverick 1, what should we write? And he said, use the word Bereshit, in the beginning, the first word of the Bible. And the scriptures say that this word encapsulate everything that was, everything that will be. Amazing. So we put the word Bereshit. And for a long time, I did like a thought experiment. It seems like I'm the only one that cared in the company what I'm going to engrave in the second generation. And I couldn't find anything better than the word Bereshit. So I said, okay, let's keep the word Bereshit. October 7 came. Moments before the tape out. Tape out is when we take the design into TSMC and we start making the mask for production. The day after, I sent an email and I said, well, those horrible things happened to us. And the only thing that I want to put in the chip is Am Israel Chai, like the Israeli state lives. This is a message for resilience. This is a message of that encapsulate everything. It took us like a few weeks to get the approval, with me threatening that I'm not going to tape out. But, it was just a policy and me being over emotional because they couldn't say no. And here we are. And I'm so much proud that we etched that on the chip. And it just reflects everything that NextSilicon stands for and Israel stands for.
This is incredible to think about all the BDS folks who will be, calling for BDS of Israel when their chip in their computer or the cloud somewhere that they're leveraging has Am Yisrael Chai on the chip. I love it. Elad, thank you. And thank you for the audacity. Thank you for, a lot of respect to you, to the team, to the investors who are doubling down on this and taking the grit that this silicon journey requires.
Yeah, I love that you said earlier that this sounded like something fun to do. So you are a very special person for sure. Thank you so much, Elad.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, that was a lot of information. I thought Elad was fascinating. The last story he shared was also, I didn't expect a conversation on semiconductors to be so moving, but it definitely was.
We tell the story of AI globally, and we don't realize how central Israel is to the backbone of AI, to the backbone of semiconductors. And his story about the Weizmann Institute in the early days and how Israel was a pioneer in computation in the original machines in the early 50s. That was a time when there was austerity in Israel. It was the time where there were food stamps in Israel, and the country decided to invest thousands of dollars in creating one of the world's first computers where people were rationing food.
Yeah, it's I think the way you frame it makes it all the more clear just what a bold bet it was. So great interview. We do need to close. And as usual, we're going to end with our words of the week. We start with the numbers. We're going to end with the words. I am not sticking with the semiconductor theme of this entire episode. I wanted to mix it up a little bit and do something completely different. So for those in New York and those who are following along just because you're fans, last week, the Israeli singer, very popular singer, Omer Adam, played a sold-out show in New York's Madison Square Garden. 20,000 people showed up. For those of us, again, in the U.S., whether you're in or out of New York, it is significant. I think for Israelis, it's significant, obviously. And this is what he wrote to fans ahead of the show. Madison Square Garden, we are on our way. Please fasten your seatbelts. I hope you're ready. At last, we can celebrate. Our brothers and sisters are home. Am Yisrael Chai. Actually is a really nice thread to the interview with Elad. Am Yisrael Chai. It's amazing. I have to say, it for whatever reasons, for a number of reasons, it's the elections in New York, the mayoral elections that we're all following. It's the return of the hostages. It's the ceasefire. This is I thought, a really special moment. And yes, there's an economic angle to it too, because they sold out Madison Square Garden. So there's that.
We started this at the beginning of the episode. The feeling on the street in Israel, Omer Adam is kind of like a barometer, right? Or you can take the temperature of the nation through Omer Adam. Is like so mainstream and touches so many Israeli households. It's a great reflection of what we're experiencing in Israel. It's this sort of like a heavy weight lifted. And really now is the time to make the tough decisions and not to lean back. There's a big pressure, feeling that we just want to relax and rest, and it's the intuitive thing to do. I think that for the sake of Israel's future, its 100th year of Jewish sovereignty here in the state of Israel over the next 20 plus years, this is exactly the time to reinvent. This is exactly the time to lean in and not lean back. We can't afford any other strategy at this point in time.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for tuning in to ARC Media's What's Your Number? We hope you found it interesting. And if you did, please be sure to like, subscribe, rate, review. You know the drill. Most importantly, please share it with others who you think will find it interesting. And if you want to make suggestions, we are always happy to hear from you. Share your feedback, good, bad, ugly, maybe just good, but we'll take the rest. Please reach out to us at what'syournumber@arcmedia.org.
What's Your Number is produced by Adam James Levina Rady. Sound and video editing is by Martin Huergo. Our theme music is by Midnight Generation. I'm Yonatan Deary.
And I'm Michal Avram. We'll see you back here next week.
AWS permitting. We'll see you back here next week. Bye, Michal.
Bye. This podcast offers general business and economic information and is not a comprehensive summary for investment decisions. It does not recommend or solicit any investment strategy or security.